Welcome to another episode in Red and Black, where your conservatism is not just the color that you're used to. I'm Lenny McAllister, and I am the official keeper of all the purple races that President Obama has helped when he's gone on the campaign trail. And I have three people to verify this list. Starting with Melanie Collette, who is actually in New Jersey and has been able to witness some of the ongoings with that New Jersey governor's race. Is this an accurate list of all the people that he's been able to help over the course of his?
I believe that's accurate. Yes. Yes, that's accurate. That's as a complete, full list of all the people he's been able to help.
Appreciate that. Jeff Charles, the person that is playing the role of the big guy with the big head tonight because small technology didn't want to play nice because they were getting in the way. They wanted to stop you from expressing your voice, Jeff Charles. But daggone it, you will not be stopped. What do you have to say about the Obama success list when it comes to him on the campaign trail? Which, by the way, no offense to the Republicans that also watch the show, but it looks an awful lot like the Trump list too sometimes. What say you, Jeff?
Yeah, I'd say the list is accurate, but there is one group that did help a Republican get elected, and that would be the Lincoln Project. They did wonders for Glenn Youngkin. He should be grateful. As a matter of fact, I tweeted out a satirical tweet saying that they sent him a fruit basket thanking him, and people think it's real.
That's the whole other thing.
That was me. That didn't really happen. I made it up. And it made it to Fox News.
I
I'm
saw
the king
that.
of trolls.
Well, Jeff is in fact the original fruit basket, just so we're clear.
Yes, a fruit basket case.
So Dr. Christopher J. Metzler, genius in residence here at Red and Black. We can go all the way back to the old Obama U.S. Senate seat that Alexei Janulius was trying to capture when he was running against Mark Kirk in 2010, when I crested my beat-up SUV on the shores of Lake Michigan, and Obama in Illinois, as a sitting president, 2 years in, couldn't get Alexei Janulius over the top. And of course, Melanie Collette and Jeff Charles and some other folks are like, who the heck is Alexei Janulius? And Dr. Metzler, that's exactly my point.
Yeah, well, that, in fact, is exactly the point, because, the former president, not very successful relative to these issues at all. Look, it would have been better to bring out Michelle. She, in fact, would have been much more successful than he is. But
yeah. Barack Obama didn't get Barack Obama elected the first time around. Michelle Obama helped get Barack Obama elected the first time around. And by the way, nobody remembers Barack Obama's speech from 2012. The "when they go low, we go high" speech is not Barack H. Obama, 44th President of the United States. It was that First Lady that gave that speech that everybody remembers.
Yes, precisely. And so Michelle Obama, Nee Robinson, get her out there. That would have been more effective.
That's true. Well, and by the way, that was not 2012. That was 2016 when she gave that speech. But let's dive into first Virginia, then New Jersey. And I'm going to actually go to you first, Jeff. People say that Glenn Youngkin ran because either A, Terry McAuliffe was a bad candidate, which I can agree with, or B, that it was because there were white suburban soccer moms that were scared of CRT, which again, here comes the CRT boogeyman, as if that's the thing to blame on everything when it comes to people voting. Jeff, can we please talk about why these soccer moms were just mad that their school stayed closed and it had nothing to do with CRT, and they were mad about their economy and they're mad about inflation, and that they should stop trying to blame Republicans, quote unquote, being racist on every reason why Democrats don't come out for bad candidates?
They can't do it, Lenny. I mean, and I tweeted out, anybody who thinks that this election was just about CRT is either uninformed or they're being disingenuous. But I know that that's what they want people to think, because that's the narrative that they want to push, right? Yeah, CRT was an issue. Whether it's a boogeyman or not, it was an issue. And even if one doesn't think that the CRT is a serious thing, the stuff that's being taught in these schools, I mean, it's irrefutable that this is happening. It's not happening in most schools, but it is happening in some. But even on top of that, people are worried about the quality of education. I mean, when Terry McAuliffe said that parents should have no say in what their children are being taught, that goes even beyond CRT. So yeah, there was that. There were economic concerns. I mean, there were a lot of different issues. I mean, and the thing about Glenn Youngkin is that he talked about the issues. He didn't just talk about CRT. He talked about things that people care about. Why does it take so long to get stuff done at the DMV? That's something that anybody can relate to. So there were a host of issues that he talked about, but they think that just because he talked about this one issue, that accounts for the whole reason why people voted for him. Now, they know this isn't true, but this is the narrative that they want to push, which honestly is the biggest mistake that they can make, and I'm glad that they're making it. The way they reacted after the election shows that they have not learned from their mistakes. So I don't know what to tell them.
Dr. Metzler, I mean, you see these type of mistakes repeated over and over again by political parties. Why can't political parties that are professionals, why can't they get these messages? Why can't they get this right?
Well, so a couple of things. First of all, I'm not sure that Republicans won Virginia. I think, in fact, the Democrats lost Virginia. That's number one. Number two, on the CRT issue, as the only person who's taught CRT on this broadcast at the law school level, this wasn't about CRT. Here's the thing. If I'm going to ask suburban moms to vote for me, I'm not going to say, oh, vote for me, even though I believe that the state has more authority to educate your children than you do. There's the issue. The other problem was they made a critical mistake. The McAuliffe campaign, McAuliffe ran a campaign that was very, very ghetto. It was a ghetto campaign. It was disorganized. It was a hot, steaming, stinky mess. Here, from the standpoint of the campaign, here's the thing. When you're running a campaign and you're just kind of all over the place, Terry was not California. You weren't running against Larry Elder. You tried, in fact, to bring into place Trump. Ridiculous. And then you're talking about banning books and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, dude, what is wrong with you? You ain't in the hood. You ran a campaign like you in the hood. That's why you lost.
But here's the more interesting thing, Dr. Metz. So now I'm going to go over to you, Melanie, and then I'm going to eventually get to New Jersey. He ran it as if he wasn't a former governor.
Right.
So how do you, I mean, look, when you're the former governor, you run for re-election in Virginia, there's two things that are going against you. Number one, you're an incumbent, so you have a record. And number two, you have a record from 4 years ago. Virginia is the only state where you cannot run for re-election right after your term. So people have a 4-year period of time where they get to not only reflect upon your record and get to allow it to seep in, but on top of that, you're kind of yesterday's news in a very cold and stale type of way. He didn't try to use any of that incumbency at all. Stale incumbency. It's not real incumbency. Stale incumbency, Melanie. They didn't try to use any of it and then ran a bad campaign. And the Dems wonder why they lost when you got all this other stuff coming out of Washington, D.C., right in the shadow of Virginia.
Well, they think that they're in a position of moral superiority. It's part of their problem that they have. They are in this perpetual. I mean, if you watched at the time of this taping, the most recent press conferences with the deputy press secretary, because the Circleback girl has COVID. They come from such an aloof, like we're just so morally superior to everything else. Meanwhile, they're installing all these draconian, rules and regulations, laws that they're trying to refer to as laws all over the country. And every Democrat is doing that. And they think that they really believe their own bull. And they think they have the moral high ground. And I think that that's why they have not been campaigning seriously the way they should be. And that's fine. Don't take us seriously. I like when people don't take me seriously. Also, they can shout while they're picking themselves up off the ground. Do it. That's what happened on Tuesday. That's what happened in Virginia, and that's what happened in several seats here in New Jersey.
And you all have an interesting race. I'm coming to New Jersey because it's not just the governor's race that shocked the world there. But Jeff, I mean, look, it's as if the Democrats and Joe Biden actually told them this in 2020. When they were like, defund the police, Joe Biden was like, please stop saying that. You're going to hurt my ears.
He wasn't the only one.
So that was on the ballot this past Tuesday, and it lost. A Democratic socialist won the Democratic primary in Buffalo to be the next mayor, and the incumbent ran a write-in campaign and won the election. The far left platform lost on Tuesday. It's more than just one candidate here, one candidate there. So when you start talking, I won't even say Democrats, I will say far left progressives,
right?
We needed to go back to the drawing board and say, we heard the voters. Now it's going to be very interesting, Jeff, and then I'll open up the other two. Do they say America's too racist to really get down with an agenda for equality? Or do these folks go back and say, okay, we wanted an agenda for equality, but maybe we went too far in our initial approach and we need to recalibrate what we're saying and doing?
No, Lenny, these people don't know how to do anything else. They don't know how to recalibrate. They don't know how to maybe moderate some things. Like even with the whole CRT issue, like I tweeted out, I said, you know what, if they had admitted that there are some issues with the way certain things are being taught in schools, but then still insisted that certain things should be taught as far as Black history goes, they may not have lost that election, or they may have actually done better. When it comes to defund the police, if they had said, you know, maybe we don't want fewer police officers on the street, and maybe we shouldn't be demonizing them so much, but we do need some huge reforms, they might still be relevant. But the problem is they don't know how to do anything else. And the thing about far left progressives is they tend to live in an echo chamber where everybody agrees with them. So they can't even comprehend the idea that Americans can reject what they're bringing to the table and it not be about racism or bigotry. That literally does not compute in their mind. So that's why they make so many strategic mistakes, and they can't do anything else because they don't really understand what's going on here. They don't understand that they're out of touch with the American people on the left and the right.
Dr. Messler?
Well, and when you look at this this was a kitchen table discussion election. And what's her name? Jamila Paul, whatever her name is. Whatever her name is, who's never met a camera or a microphone she doesn't love, this loss falls squarely in her lap. She spent more time being on Rachel Maddow every night talking about how she is the optimist in chief. Girl, nobody cares. People care about gas prices. They care about their rent, their mortgage. They care about can they feed their children, what their children are being taught in school. They care about inflation. And this entire conversation with you going after Manchin and Sinema, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. But of course you're not, but you ought to be.
In reality, it's kind of interesting because to Dr. Messler's point and to Jeff's point, you know, what they failed to realize is that two things happened last year at the same exact time. Both the protest over racism that sparked up from George Floyd, that happened at the same exact time. A whole bunch of jobs went away. At the same exact time, the economy was tanking. Well, guess what? You can stop protesting in the streets the way they did in the summer of 2020, but the economy's been rocky ever since to the point that the guys made. The inflation's still there that they felt last year, but maybe not the social impetus that they felt from last year. So if you're pushing an agenda that doesn't fit the current times, that's how you lose elections on an election night.
And they really think the problem is that they're not listening to the people. They think that they're right. Like they think that they're the smartest person in the room. And anytime you think you're the smartest person in the room and everything you do is right, and you're not listening to what the people are saying, this is where you end up. AOC said today, you know what the problem is that we didn't go hard enough. We were too wishy-washy, too moderate. We didn't go progressive enough. That's they really think that. Like that's they believe that huge package that they had that they're trying to push through had nothing to do with all the big L's that they took all over the country.
But it's the package, but it's more so it's the philosophy, right? So
right
in Minneapolis, which is already a weird look, Minneapolis gave everybody Prince. So that should tell you just how weird that place can be. So you have that George Floyd, it's already a liberal state. They gave you Prince as a musician and Jesse Ventura as a governor. Okay? So if you're going to have something kooky and sideways, it's Minnesota. Minnesota said, Minnesota, by the way, everybody, not Minnesota, Minnesota. They said, we like police forces when it comes to crime, not safety departments. We need police officers, not public safety civilians to take care of things like domestic violence incidences. Because by the way, that's what the majority of what police officers deal with are domestic violence incidences. And a lot of those jump off to be violent, whether it's the guy or the lady involved in that, or in some instances, the guy and the lady teaming up on the police officer. You go read the police blotters. That's how that stuff goes down. If they in Minnesota and Minneapolis say we still want police forces, how in the world were they not far left enough and not aggressive enough, Jeff?
Well, but that's the thing. Like, progressives don't listen. They don't listen to what you want. They tell you what you want. And that makes sense, right? It's Marxism. That's exactly how Marxism works. They don't care what people want. They don't care that defunding the police is going to put people in danger. Crime skyrocketed, and they were still trying to defund the police. So that's the thing. They say these things like, oh, we just didn't go far enough. It's not because they didn't go far enough. It's just because they don't really care what you think about what they have to offer. If they get enough people in office, they will slam their agenda through no matter what the citizens think of it. And really, the people voting against it are just a hindrance to these people. So no, they're not even there for the people. They're just there to push their agenda.
But yeah, and I would also say, like I told a number of Republican strategists on a call today, it's great that we're rejoicing. However, as Republicans, we are very good at snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Let us not be overconfident. Let us not overplay our hand. And let us understand the expectation is that we are going to have to deliver. Because we get so comfortable often, yeah, we're victorious. That's great. But we have to be able to deliver. And until we're able to do that, that's going to be a problem.
So look, we don't need Jeff's expertise anymore because he was our Virginia expert here. So Jeff, go do your dinner, go do your fancy pants type of thing. We will catch up to you next week. By the way, tell us what you're working on this week before we let you go, and then I'll go to the other smart people on this call, on the show.
Yeah, I've got a big interview dropping. It may have dropped today, or it might drop tomorrow on my audio podcast, A Fresh Perspective.
Wait a minute, hold on. Before you say, how do you not know when it drops? You're the dude that has the fresh perspective, but then what is this?
It depends on when my producer drops it. See, I'm fancy. I have a producer, so he has to put it out there. So you know what I'm saying?
Wow.
But anyway, this is a very important interview because we talk about how local politics can be just as corrupt as the federal government. And the story that this guy tells, you're going to want to listen to it. So check it out on wherever you get your podcasts.
Dig it. Well, listen, man, make sure you all check out A Fresh Perspective and check out Jeff Charles here on Red and Black next week. Peace to you, sir. We'll catch up to you later on. You enjoy that dinner. Jeff's doing a fancy pants dinner tonight, so we got to let him go, y'all. So appreciate him being here as always. You have a good evening, kind sir. Let me get to the rest of you all here, right? So here's the thing, and Melanie, I want to go to you on this. It's not just the fact that you have this very close New Jersey's governor's race. that's going on right now. It's the fact that a truck driver beat one of the most influential politicians in New Jersey. A truck driver, not like truck drivers aren't smart, but when I say a truck driver, I mean a truck driver that spent under $500 to win the primary and then spent under $10,000 to beat one of the most powerful politicians in the state of New Jersey. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that means for what Blue New Jersey went through on Tuesday night with all these quote unquote red politicians peeking their heads up and either getting victory or getting darn close to it?
I think that particularly in New Jersey, politicians in certain areas, particularly in North Jersey, that New York area got comfortable. Because I'll tell you where I live in as far south as you can go in New Jersey, like near the Delaware Bay, and we're all red all the time. But it's not that way in northern New Jersey, where Sweeney and all of them reside, and they're very and that's why they call New Jersey blue, but there are some sections that are very red. But they get comfortable, and they did not take this guy seriously. And we have a saying on a local level when we run elections. We say you run two ways. You run either unopposed or scared. No matter how weak you think your opponent is, that is the way you run. You run to destroy. You run to kill. Period. You run to make sure that person never thinks about running against us again. No matter what you think about the opponent. Steve Sweeney, too comfortable. And that's what happens. You get jacked.
What say you, sir? I mean, you see this stuff all the time. You see these upsets with people that don't spend much, don't do much, and shake up the world.
Well, I mean, he ran essentially on the AOC model, which is nobody took AOC very seriously. After all, she was a bartender, blah, 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 and she completely shocked the establishment. Look, this whole issue of these politicians becoming comfortable and not talking to the people. The guy who won spoke to the people. He knocked on doors. He did what we call old style retail politics.
Yep.
The leader thought, why do I am the most powerful on this? I've got millions of dollars. This guy's a joke. Yeah, now you're the joke, former leader. You're the joke. Because the fact of the matter is, I go back to what I have said, and I said this months ago on this very show. When we talk about elections, we are talking about kitchen table bread and butter issues. We are spending too much time worrying about what's going on in Washington and the fights in Washington about the infrastructure bill and the this and the that, the BBB and no, look, at the end of the day, regular Americans who have to go through this every day don't care about that. They care about those issues that affect them directly. And until you can speak to those issues and provide solutions, you will be irrelevant. That's the reality.
And so, go ahead, Melanie.
No, I was going to say, and just from a campaign management perspective, you have to always run your campaign. You have to take every opponent seriously. Like I said earlier, your job is to destroy them, no matter how unassuming they may be. Your job is to kill politically. Your job is to kill them and make them think twice before they ever approach you again.
It's funny because it's almost like professional sports, right? You're in that arena, which means you can win. So if you don't take the person seriously, you can lose at any point in time in any given way. And it's, you look at over the course of the last, 20 years in particular, and I don't know if this happened quite as much in American politics as it has over the last 20 years. I would say part of it is technology. It shrunk the world. Part of it is technology. It helped bring people closer together, kind of level the playing field in some regards. You can run a smart, cheap campaign online and don't need the big money. And on top of that, because you have all these different outlets, you don't have to have the same accesses to the media that you used to have 50, 60, 70 years ago. But again, I brought up Jesse Ventura as an example, but look at all the different types of people that have been everywhere from the White House all the way down to dog catcher in these elections that you simply didn't expect to see even 15 years ago. And these elections, I mean, I guess I should ask the question to both of you, should this be as much of a surprise as it ended up being? Both the governor's race in New Jersey, but also races like the one that we're talking about, where these high-profile politicians, whether it's AOC in New York City a couple of congressional terms ago, or what we saw on Tuesday night, transpire when we had Donald Trump as president, we had Barack Obama as president. We've had all these different type of elections that simply should not have happened, but yet seem to be more and more commonplace these days.
Well, I think electioneering has changed significantly. And I think the kind of people who you are going to see in elected office will continue to change. Because here's the problem. The problem is that folks want people who will deliver solutions. That is not at all what we have. What we have is people who get to Washington, they become so comfortable, and it doesn't matter if they're right or left, they are still doing the traditional backroom deals. It may not be the smoke-filled room, but it is exactly the same thing. And see, I think Americans are finally saying, you know what, I'm sick of this. But here's the thing. Americans are saying they're sick of it. However, Americans still are not at the point where they want to push term limits in any significant way. Because what they're saying, throw the bum out, just not my bum, because my bum is a nice person. And that is exactly the problem that we're continuing to have. So, it is going to continue to evolve. And as I said on, and folks are now going to start with the mean tweets that I'm a Russian spy. But as I said on Russian TV today, the issue really relative to this particular election was the fact that, so let's look at Virginia. They got extremely comfortable. They ran a slipshod campaign. And once Terry McAuliffe said what he said about Paris, I knew at that point the election was over. There was no need. I don't care, you could have brought Jesus Christ himself in at that point, and he could have wept with Mary Magdalene there. It would not have mattered because it was over.
They did pick Barabbas, so it's not like even Jesus didn't exactly have the best of luck when it came to elections. So
Yeah.
even when his own was on the line, so I'm just,
True.
it's not blasphemous, people. It's biblically based. Go read your New Testament.
Nope, you're right.
But with that said, I mean, let's go back to that statement. I know we go back and forth between Virginia and New Jersey, but these are interesting case studies. Melanie, there are certain phrases in debate history and American political history that people will remember. They'll remember Gerald Ford telling us that there's no Soviet presence in Eastern Europe in the 1976 election, which made everybody go, what? There you go again from Ronald Reagan in 1980. They'll remember that. They'll remember that I'm not going to let your youth and inexperience be an issue at this debate in 1984. There are certain things that George H.W. Bush looking at his watch and being bored at the 1992 debate. There are certain things that people remember at debates that candidates just don't overcome. Terry McAuliffe created one of those moments that if you're going to put it into a textbook in regards to this is something you should never do. If you find yourself doing this, bite your tongue until it bleeds. Don't let the rest of the sentence come out of your mouth. He created one of those moments in this race, and it didn't just hurt his race. It kind of exemplified all the frustrations that parents have had over the last 18 months with education that has led to school choice really taking off in America.
Indeed, and what he did was he told the truth. I mean, let's just be honest. That is how the socialists in the public education system honestly feel. I can tell you as somebody who's worked in the public education system for 10 years now. I was in private education for 14 years before that. And the public schools literally teach public school teachers that they are the most important factor in a child's education. When the research, which is wild because most educators tout themselves on being research-based, but the research does not bear that out. the research bears out that parent involvement is the number one thing that's an indicator of student success. But public schools will tell you, no, it's us, it's them. And, CRT has, somebody mentioned the other day, how come we haven't been talking about CRT for years? I said, I've been talking about it ever since I've been a public school teacher. It's insidious the way it's in there and woven throughout curriculums. You'll have little sections about racism and economics that have nothing to do with the lesson. I'm like, not teaching that. Bye. Next, they'll have something about climate change, some little project at the end of a unit, and that's totally racist. I'm like, I'm not teaching that. You're crazy. I'm not teaching it. But I've seen it in many different curriculums, in many different little slick ways, and I didn't even know what it was until I went till CRT came up, and I researched it, and I'm like, well, that's what that is. I always knew it was wrong, but that's what that is, and I think that's what parents have been observing in the lessons. They'll be teaching. The lesson will be a math lesson, and it'll be like, so and so has 2 mommies. And they're like, whoa, wait, why is the word question about so and so having 2 mommies? Why is the word question about somebody being white or black? And this is math. Why are we doing that?
Well,
Yeah,
but again, I am one of these people who I'm very precise about language. What is being taught in those schools is not CRT.
I didn't say it was. I said it's being used.
No. But what I'm saying is, this is what folks are saying.
Right.
Like the guy who was interviewed and said, well, I don't know what CRT is, but I know I don't like it. CRT is a theoretical construct. And it's taught primarily in law schools, where law students barely get a B- in that class. I've taught it. And so I understand that. However, in fact, what is being taught in the schools, which should not be taught in the schools, is in large part the teachers' feelings as to how we should, quote unquote, equalize education.
But what I'm saying is, it's not about the teachers' feelings. They're putting it in print. They're putting it in textbooks. They're putting it in lessons. It's not about, I have training, equity training, racial bias training, culturally sensitive training that almost comes as close to you possibly can without outright saying whitey is bad. Without outright saying it, basically says that.
But
and I've been fuming about that for years because it's wrong. It is wrong for people to have that perspective. That's wrong.
But here is the reason why that happens. What we're not talking about, and what we have not talked about in this entire discussion about CRT, as I said, first of all, let's get rid of CRT discussion because that's not what this is. What we've not discussed is the way textbooks are purchased in schools. We have not discussed the kickbacks that is given.
Yes, very corrupt.
The discussion we need to have.
Very corrupt. Yes.
Not for that corruption and those kickbacks, we would not have that in print, because the head of a school system comes in, the union people comes in, and what do? They give the contracts to their friends, and that in part, and that it's amazing to me that discussion has never come out. So their friends essentially take those feelings and put them in print. And that is exactly the problem that we have. So you have this leftist ideology that is done and peddled for profit. To me, that is a much richer discussion than trying to chase the elusive CRT. That's the issue.
I agree.
Hold on. But let's get back to why CRT has been such a hook. It's not because people are worried about what's actually taught in the classroom. They are, but they're not.
No, they are.
They are, but they're not.
Don't tell me. I've been in the classroom.
Melanie, hold on. I'm going to tell you. Wait a minute.
We are. I'm not even a parent. I'm a teacher. and I'm
Okay,
concerned.
so part of it, and I am a parent, so I have a little bit of a say so and authority on this. What my point is, though, it's part of it is definitely people obviously care about what their kids are being taught. But let's go back to why CRT has been such an issue on election night, because it's driving elections. And it kind of goes back to Dr. Metzler's point, and that's where I want to go, which is there's the actual substance of what we're talking about as far as what's being taught in schools. Why are the textbooks that are being used being used? How are we getting there? How are these school boards selecting this? How are they selecting what teachers can and cannot do in the classroom? That's a whole separate conversation. But these elections, and I am going to go to you first, Melanie, then I'll go back to you, Dr. Metzler. These discussions are more politically driven. And because you have politicians that don't really understand these issues all that well, they're taking a briefing and trying to contextualize that into a 30-second soundbite. They're stepping all over themselves, and it's driving the base. And then it's a matter of who can almost kind of understand the juicy, sugary soundbite the best to get their base high up on a sugar high. Because that's what ended up happening, where the Democrats could not do it because they can't explain it. And the Republicans, back to Dr. Metzler's point, people are saying, I don't know what CRT is, but I know I don't like it. But that's been enough to get some of these people to the polls. They're already mad that the schools have been closed. They're already mad at how the schools have handled COVID. And then you add this to the mix, it was enough to be politicized and drive them to the polls.
I think that as a teacher, and if I'm a parent and I hear some of the stuff that teachers are saying to my kids, I would be freaking livid too. I know what gets said in other classrooms. I know what's in these textbooks. I also know what's in the teacher's notes in these textbooks. I know what's in the teacher's training behind what's in these textbooks, what they tell us to do in order to be inclusive, and how highly racist it is.
But they weren't there for you. The point is, Melanie, that stuff has been baked into the cake in education for years.
That's right. And
it took COVID, number one,
right,
to highlight some of this stuff. And number two, some of the other elements of education that came into play that brought even more spotlight to basic, both elementary and secondary education, for people to really get involved in this, which included the CRT discussion / debate that really had people that were never looking at this stuff before to really dig into it.
Yeah, I think parents were in the other room. Maybe their kids were on a Zoom, and the teacher's just teaching away. And you know, when you hear something that don't sound right, say, what did that teacher just say? Because teachers are out and out in classrooms giving their opinions on Trump, on Republicans. They have statues and stand cutouts of their favorite liberal politicians in classrooms. They have been indoctrinating kids for years. I've been yelling about this indoctrination long before the term CRT came out on the scene. I've been screaming about this.
Dr. Metzler, isn't it also the fact that the parents had to play the role of teachers for a little bit of time, and now they got to see what this actually looked like versus just kind of being a passing participant on the train going down the tracks?
Right, because in fact, the parents had to step into a role in which they, were not used to. And let's also be very clear here. Let's not try to sugarcoat this. Listen, a number of public schools do not teach kids. They are babysitters. Baby's kids, these parents put their badass kids in these schools with no discipline and expect the teachers to be babysitters. Now, once we had COVID and we had all of these the virtual learning, then in fact, the parents had to be very much involved. And I will go back, as I always do, to Baltimore City and the disaster that is the Board of Education in Baltimore City. Listen, at the end of the day, and here's the other thing. So you look at organizations such as Teach for America, who have said publicly that in fact diversity and inclusion are core to what they do. Great, sounds good on paper, but let's be clear, it is supposed to be diversity and inclusion, not diversity in the place of exclusion. And so that is essentially what has happened in a number of the public school systems. And I go back to what I said earlier. Parents really and school boards need to be held accountable for the selection of textbooks. We need to look at the extreme corruption in
Yes.
public school systems across the country and look at these superintendents and others who are getting kickback for the purchase of textbooks of a leftist ideology. And it doesn't have to be exclusively leftist ideology, but any ideology. The fact is, teachers are supposed to teach, they are not supposed to opine.
Exactly. And a lot of teachers opine. And let me just say this, with Dr. I just want to piggyback a little bit off of what Dr. Metzler said about the exclusion. And what you look at when you see, like, okay, they want to be more inclusive. So they use, in every example, everybody's name is ethnic. That's fine. But now there is no Sally. There's no Ken. Like, there's no white names. It's like, okay, if we're going to be inclusive, let's be inclusive. We talk about every other religion where we're talking about being inclusive in the curriculum and in the materials. Everyone but Christianity. We don't talk about that. We're like, it's okay to be anything and everything else, but not Christian. That's a problem. To me, that is not inclusive. So that's why I get really ticked when we start talking about being inclusive. I'm like, it's okay unless I say boy is a boy and a girl is a girl. Then now, and that's my Christian belief. Now, instead of being inclusive, I'm a bigot. That is exactly what public schools are teaching your kids.
There are some public schools that absolutely have gone down that path, and that becomes problematic because, we have now changed the definition of diversity to diversity means my point of view, and inclusion means my point of view only and not everybody's point of view. People, and we'll say this, and I want to get to Joe Biden before we go. People have forgotten how to be inclusive of people they disagree with in America. Because inclusion in the melting pot does not mean that every ingredient is your favorite ingredient in the melting pot of America.
Right.
It does mean that it's a melting pot of all these different ingredients that makes this country what it is. I want to get to this, though, because we're talking about CRT. We're talking about the education issues. But I want to bring up Joe Biden with this, because Joe Biden, one, can't be happy about what happened in New Jersey and in Virginia with the barely won Democratic race in New Jersey and the lost race in Virginia. But he also can't be happy about the fact that, Dr. Metzler, he was supposed to be the presidential candidate this time last year that was going to reunite America. I'm going to help us heal together. We're going to come back together. We're going to build back stronger. Sorry about the pun. None of that's happened. We are staying in silos. That division is still here. And it seems as though that Biden's Democratic Party is still more worried about focusing on the divisiveness of America, from Trump to some of these other cultural issues, than they are about Biden's own campaign promise from this time last year, which was reuniting America after the 2020 election.
Well, so here's the thing. The Biden administration has failed branding 101. They came in with a brand promise. The brand promise was, in fact, we are going to be the administration of competence and action. They are neither competent or active. That's number one. They did further damage to the brand equity. He got brand equity because, in fact, of all of his years as a senator, blah, 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 blah. None of that has happened. And then he's put into place a vice president who is not only above her head, but frankly, is just simply an idiot. I oftentimes wish I could call the vice president's office and say, "Oh, Madam Vice President, the village called, they want their idiot back. Please get back immediately." The fact of the matter is, when you fail brand promise and brand equity, you're done. And there is no attempt to correct that. Where are all of these competent people he was supposed to have bring forth? None of them. Did they disappear? They're in space. Where are they? And so this is the problem that they have. And it seems like there's no attempt at course correction. He said, I don't know that passing the bill would have made any kind of difference. And finally, dude, your country is in crisis and you're going to some stupid conference, climate change conference. And by the way, all of your friends who have gone to this climate change, whatever it is, conference, what about their carbon footprint? How many of them took their private jets over there, Mr. Hypocrite?
Well, I get that. And let's just be fair. Most presidents, when something's really bad happening on the domestic front, what do? They get on a plane. They go someplace else. If there's something bad on the East Coast that's bad politically, what do? They go out to California and do a West Coast trip. So those that follow politics, as you well know, Dr. Metzler, should not be shocked that he's overseas when a piece of legislation that he's been trying to get through for months is still struggling to get it past the finish line. A race that he wanted to see some indications from didn't go so well, and all the big players he pulled out to help pull McAuliffe over the finish line failed.
But this
That's
is
not really a shock to anybody.
No, this is different. This is different in the fact that you came after the Trump administration, in which you promised something that was significant. And so if you were the leader that you said you were, you've been in office a full year now, you would have gotten more political points by trying to rescue that than go take random naps at the climate change conference. And again, I go back to the hypocrisy. Listen, you're going for climate change and all of your friends are going over there with a significant carbon footprint. Look, dude, in this situation, if you want to distinguish yourself as competent, you would do something different than what all of your predecessors have done. That would have saved your brand.
And interestingly enough, Melanie, when and I know it wasn't a midterm election, it feels that way a little bit, but it wasn't a midterm election. But in 2010, when the red Republican wave with the height of the Tea Party came through and had these historic wins, at least then President Obama said, we got shellacked and we heard the message. It's as if right now we're not even hearing the Democrats say that. And it's funny because everybody from MSNBC to CNN are like, I mean, I've heard some of the interviews. Hey, Democrats, they're telling you screwed up. Are you listening? And it seems as though, Melanie, that they're tone deaf, that they don't want to listen, at least not right now. Maybe they're in shock going into year one. But I tell you what, if the job numbers don't look good over this past weekend, and the unemployment numbers aren't encouraging, and the inflation continues to go up, and education becomes a big issue, and you have these losses, this isn't the way that Joe Biden and the Democrats want to spend a happy holiday season, is it?
No, it isn't. And they're in complete and total denial. Like the denial is just amazing. Like I thought for sure there'd be some kind of contrition or something. Like maybe now there are some, I've seen some Democrats on some media saying, you know, these losses are concerning. But certainly the administration at large is not saying that. They are in complete and total denial about what has happened. Kamala Harris said herself, first time I actually agree with her, that what happens in Virginia is going to be a bellwether for what happens in the midterms. You don't think the Republicans are going to try to do the same thing during the midterms? Oh, you darn right, Miss Chucks and Pearls. We sure are coming for you during the midterms. But they're not getting the picture. And again, I think it's a case of total self-righteousness. I think it's a case of complete incompetence. Like, not only are their policies bad, but they also are literally incompetent and incapable of running the country. Anytime you go to a climate change summit and you don't discuss China, not to mention, I'm going to say it, corrupt. They're incompetent, they're corrupt, and they're self-righteous, which makes for a bad combination.
I'm going to stop the show here and it's kind of because this is going to be a part 2 because, you know, next week we're going to be still talking about the aftermath of this election, you know, going over and talking about climate change, not talking about India, not talking about China, and then still having this malaise of of COVID and still Wuhan. I mean, people don't talk about Wuhan anymore, but we have 750,000 Americans dead from COVID. And we're now 18 months into a pandemic, and we still don't have answers from Wuhan. You're talking about a climate change conference where China's still trying to skirt the rules whenever they can. We haven't talked about Chinese espionage when it comes to our business community. That's been going on for years. That's not even an issue anymore. So that's still underneath the radar. And if the job numbers don't come back rosy, and if we're still hearing about inflation, and we're still talking about the aftermath of these elections, and heaven forbid the COVID numbers go up and it starts impacting schools all over again, all that unity that we were talking about with, Joe Biden on January 20th of this year, which, by the way, January 20th, 2021 seems like it was 10 years ago, not 10 months ago. Couple that with the whole, and we didn't get into it this week, we'll get into it next week, trying to get the papers and executive privilege for January 6th with the Trump stuff from the Biden administration and everything else. This is one heck of a mess for this president who doesn't seem, and I'll ask you very quickly, Dr. Metzler, then you, Melanie, then we got to go. Dr. Metzler, you first. This is an administration that if you ever needed a president with a high level of energy to deal with all this ain't this dude.
No, it's not. It's not this dude. And in fact, it is no one in his administration. Listen, in his administration, what's happening is the inmates are running the asylum, whoever the inmates are in this particular case. This is a total and complete embarrassment. There is no leadership. There is no competence. There is simply mumbling and fumbling. That's it. I have heard that the vice president is trying to distance herself from him because she's preparing for her own run. Girl, bye.
That's a perfect segue because that's where I wanted to go with you, Melanie. 30 seconds. Who runs for the Democrats in 2024? Because I can't possibly see it being Joe Biden.
Oh, Kamala.
I'm not going to say
Kamala's running. Trust me. She's just obnoxious and clueless enough to absolutely run. So she's going to run. That's why you haven't heard boo from her in months. She's going to run. Definitely.
Well, actually, if she's going to run, my cat Norris is going to run against her. He'll win.
Well, Denny is going to throw his hat in the ring as well. He's got extensive barking experience, and I think that will probably beat Kamala any day.
Well, yeah, and so I think probably your dog and my cat can team up on that because my cat has extensive meowing experience, and so as a result of that, they'll beat Kamala hands down.
I think so.
Or paws down.
Hopefully they don't run as yellow dog or yellow cat or blue dog or
orange cat. So that would be interesting.
Well, my dog is biracial because he's black and white.
Yeah, there you go. He's perfect.
Melanie, what do you got going this week? Because I'm exiting stage left after that. What do you got going this week?
Mark your calendars for December 2nd, 2022. Money Talk with Melanie is coming back over these airwaves.
2022?
21.
21. I was going to say, that's one hell of a tease.
21.
Good gracious. I want to see the PR campaign for that. But okay, I hear you. We have to brag on that a couple more times. Dr. Metzler, what you got going on this week?
Oh, the usual. Like I say, look for big things coming in New York City over the next several months.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that election. We can get to that next week as well. As we already talked to you about earlier, a fresh perspective, Jeff is dropping something big. Hopefully it won't hurt when he drops it, but pay attention. You know where to find him as well. Folks, we're going to let you go. We'll talk to you next week. TCNGB, take care and God bless.
Peace.